Assalamualaikum guys. Bo Nickal is one of the most hated fighters on the roster right now, and today I will be explaining to you guys why the hate for Bo Nickal is 100% justified. So Bo Nickal he's actually an amazing wrestler. He's a former. I believe he only fought outside of the UFC 2 times. So when his professional record was 2-0, both finishes, he got signed in the UFC. Now this is the first reason. Usually for people to get into the UFC, they have to go through the Dana White's Contender Series, what was it, the Ultimate Fighter, a lot of things. Like people have to really work hard. For example, look at someone like Alexander Volkov. His record, I think he has more than 50 fights at this point, and he has not been into the UFC for that long. Like I think it's only like a few years, right? So people really have to work hard to get into the UFC, and this guy's career was very privileged from the very beginning, and it was like he is definitely one of the most overrated and one of the most glazed fighters of the UFC at this point. And like the way people talk about him, Dana White, like people talk about him being special, and the only time he actually fought someone who is stylistically a threat against him, actually a well-rounded fighter in RDR, he got knocked out in the second round. And RDR, like keep in mind, RDR later got TKO'd against Brendan Allen, who fought RDR on a short notice, right? It was actually a few weeks ago. So, anyways, the thing about it is, a lot of people say that Bo Nickal, the UFC spoiled his career. He doesn't deserve this, bro. Why the hell are you saying that the UFC is making Bo Nickal look bad, and in reality Bo Nickal is actually a very humble and a very good fighter, and he actually wants to step up his competition over time, right? Why are you saying that, bro? Even before he was in the UFC, he called out people like Khamzat Chimaev, Islam Makhachev. He said that he would out wrestle Khamzat Chimaev. Yeah, he actually did that. He genuinely did that. So like when he got knocked out against RDR, it was genuinely one of the most satisfying things ever. The way the UFC promoted this guy, right? So he is the highest favorite fighter of all time in the UFC history. I think it was like a minus 2,100 or some shit, and which is absolutely crazy. And not to mention the fact that he is constantly being put in like some of the some of the highest some of the cards, some of the fights of the most above card, the main card of not only fight nights but also UFC pay-per-views for the upcoming pay-per-view, right? In his next fight in UFC 322, right? No, sorry, I think it was UFC 323 maybe. 322 or 300, I don't know. These days there are so many pay-per-views, right? So originally he was placed above. I think it's like Alzheimer's. No, that was right. I think it was a big fight, and he was like his fight was put above that, and now he is fighting the prelims, which is obviously well deserved because yeah, I remember it was like Benoit Saint-Denis versus Beryl Dariush. So originally the UFC put this fight, Bo Nickal's fight, in the main card, and Saint-Denis and Dariush's fight in the prelims. Right? That's just so messed up. I'm very glad that the UFC fixed it now, though I still think Roman Kopylov should definitely be above Bo Nickal, because as we have seen in Kopylov's recent fights, he is an amazing fighter. Like he's like one of the most funnest unranked fighters to see at this point, like right now, and I do believe he will get a knockout, in UFC in the upcoming pay-per-view. So yeah, the thing about Bo Nickal is, right, this guy, he is he's like kind of like a wannabe Conor McGregor. Like he's arrogant as hell. He constantly puts on this arrogant, cocky persona, and the reality is Conor McGregor, when he was a cocky fighter, he actually proved that in the cage. Like he actually knocked out guys like Eddie Alvarez and Jose Aldo. Meanwhile, Bo Nickal, the only finishes he has in his entire MMA career is against a bunch of tin cans, and that's a fact. Because trust me, like his career, he is the definition of an industry plant, because his career has been fixed so perfectly, like the matchups that he's getting, and even his upcoming fight, right? As far as the style goes, like the stylistically, it's so perfect for him. Like he will beat these guys very easily. Trust me, you will see, of course, in the pay-per-view. But the thing is, right, during these types of time, when you see these guys lose, like how he got knocked out against Derrider, those are like one of the most satisfying moments in the UFC period, because when you see someone as arrogant and as cocky as Bo Nickal, and someone who, like, the UFC is promoting so much and hyping up so much and glazing so much, so unnecessarily and so undeservingly also, the downfall is just even more, satisfying, I'll be honest, because this guy, like, he had it coming against earlier, and I'm praying that he gets finished or knocked out or subbed or gets dominated in his upcoming fight. Though stylistically, the guy, I believe he's primarily a striker. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Listen, the thing is, Bo Nickal, like, he is not a bad fighter or anything. He's a very well-rounded fighter, very good fighter. He has good striking, good grappling, very well-rounded. But the thing is, the way that the UFC is promoting this guy and this guy's attitude toward the UFC and everything, like, we don't want this guy in such a huge, such an exciting card like UFC 322, and like, we don't want this guy in the press conference of that card. We would much rather have Roman Kopilov, obviously. So, and also the way that, like, he's been calling out guys like Khanzacheva, as I said, even before he was in the UFC, and like, to be honest, I do get why the UFC is trying to promote Bo so much, but the thing is, bro, like, you have to understand, like, promoting and glazing, they are completely different things, and what the UFC is doing right now is definitely glazing. Like the UFC is definitely like the UFC is definitely unnecessarily promoting this guy in so many different ways, right? Because and also, you guys remember, I think, in UFC 300, which is one of the all-time best cards of all time, right? Or one of the greatest cards of all time. In UFC 300, Bo Nickal was in the main card, and you wanna know who was in the prelims? Yuri Prohaska, Alexander Rakic, Aljamain Sterling. He was put in the card. He was put above all these guys. And remember, during that time, Yuri Prohaska had just lost his belt. So yeah, he just got knocked out against Alex Pereira. So during that time, Bo Nickal and this other unranked guy, they were in the main card. So people were paying the pay-per-view to watch Bo Nickal, and like, in for the UFC Fight Pass, Yuri Prohaska's fight against Rakic was free. So as I said, absolutely crazy. This guy, I hope he gets finished. I hope he, like, he gets desperate in the UFC, and I really hope he has an amazing downfall, hopefully. Anyways, that's all, guys. See you guys later. Inshallah, I'll see you guys. Assalamu alaikum.